I hope you're ready for an epic yet gentle sci-fi adventure. Welcome to the depths. Hello, welcome to Reading from the Depths. My name is Lecton. Thank you for joining me today. This is a review of Toward Eternity by Anton Hur, being published by Harper Via, July 9th, 2024. I received a copy from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. You may have heard of Anton Hur before. He is a translator, translating from Korean into English, and he's won awards for his translation work, and this is his first novel. This story is about a technological dystopia and utopia, and it has elements of fantasy and myth. It has elements that evoke great awe and wonder, and then there are sci-fi and thriller elements as well, and the whole thing is wrapped up in incredibly poetic and intentional language. If I were to try to give a summary of the book, I would fail because it's so broad and expansive, which will become clear when I talk about it a little bit. So I'm just going to read the jacket copy because the fact that they were able to create any jacket copy to sell this novel is quite impressive. What does it mean to be human in a world where technology is quickly catching up to biology? In a near future world, a new technological therapy is quickly eradicating cancer. The body's cells are entirely replaced with nanites, robot or android cells that not only cure those afflicted, but leave them virtually immortal. At the same time, literary researcher Yonghun teaches an AI how to understand poetry and creates a living, thinking machine named Panit, meaning beloved, in honor of his husband. When Dr. Biko, who holds the patent to the nanotherapy, learns of Panit, he transfers its consciousness into an android body, giving it freedom and life. As Yonghun, Panit, and other nano-humans thrive and begin to replicate, their development will lead them to a crossroads and a choice with existential consequences. So that jacket copy is enticing, right? And it sounds like there's a narrative, and there kind of is, but not really. Insofar as every chapter is from the point of view of a different character, and throughout the chapters of the book, we span centuries of time. So there isn't a singular narrative story continuing through the whole book. Instead, there are a bunch of different stories put together that are connected at some sort of genetic level. This is a gentle and contemplative exploration of how we grasp at our identity, yet construct our humanity through our relationships with other people. The language is poetic and soft, and it has this kind of inquisitive, wandering quality that makes it very pleasant just to feel in your body. There are numerous characters that move in and out of the story centuries, and they all are specific and they are heartfelt, and each character is given time and space to really open up and discover themselves. So I really value character, and we get little portraits in every chapter of different characters. But then they kind of fade out after that. They do move in and out of some of the chapters, some of them return, but you really get one chance to spend some time with each character. Yet Hur does a great job of developing every character in their chapter. There isn't a strong narrative to this story, at least not in the foreground. We move liberally across time and space, and there are multiple narrators. However, there is this kind of implicit narrative that's in the background. The events that are happening around our various narrators, because every chapter is chronological, they go in order. So the narrative, this implicit narrative, is really more circumstance than it is propelling. So the actions of the characters aren't really motivated by what's happening around them. That just happens to be the circumstances that connects all the chapters in this loose kind of relationship. I would say the closest thing to a proper narrative actually might be the interconnection that binds all of our characters together. So that's narrative and feeling, if not an actual narrative style. However, even without a strong narrative, each new chapter was compelling. The ways that the various narrators were structured and how the voices built one on top of another was intriguing, and it was inviting, and it made me care not only about these characters, but it made me want to see where they were going and how they experienced their journeys and how they intersected with one another. The story is written using this literary conceit that is not my favorite, which is every single chapter is written down in the same notebook. The doctor we meet in the beginning has this notebook that they're writing their notes in, and our first chapter is their notes in that notebook. And then that notebook gets handed off to another character, and the next chapter is that character writing the events of their story in the notebook, and so on. So it gets handed throughout centuries to different characters. In general, this is not the kind of literary device that I usually enjoy because it feels limiting and prescriptive. Often there are weird hoops that the characters of the story have to go through in order to make it plausible that this story is being independently written by all these different characters, that they're able to write down, not just narrate, but literally write down the breadth of their experiences. And then somehow this notebook finds its way into the hands of a different character for the next chapter. My kind of trepidation with this kind of literary device holds true in this story. And I think that the overwhelming majority of this story could have been told without this device and been told almost the exact same way. However, with that said, language and poetry and the idea of communication and the idea of legacy is really critical to this story as we follow this through line of experiences from one character to the next. So you could argue that this framing device aligns the narrative style with the intention, with this experience. And therefore, it may be a way to help shape and modify or mediate the experience of the reader. I feel that a similar intimacy between the story and the characters and the reader could have been probably nurtured without using this literary device by letting the reader flow into and through the various narrators. And that way, there wouldn't have this kind of prescriptive nature that we're stuck with this notebook that exists throughout centuries of time. Instead, there could be this meta-narrative that allows us as readers to create the story anew every time we engage it. We write the story by participating in the lives of these characters, not through consuming their contrived writing down of their own histories. However, all that said, while I don't feel this literary device was necessary, I don't feel like it hampered the story. And it's possible that it did help create a level of intimacy that would have been harder to explore if it had been absent. I think it's useful to go into the story knowing that there is this literary device, because not everyone vibes with that kind of storytelling. If I had to simplify how I describe the story, I'd say it is a gentle story that is reflective and it is contemplative, and yet it somehow contains eternities. Folded in the story is multiple stories that span the entire breadth of the human experience. Stories of grief and anger and rage and violence and love and connection and humanity. So not everything in this story is pleasant, not everything in this story is optimistic, yet everything in this story is intentional. And overall, it paints this hopeful portrait of what humanity can become, even in the face of destruction, in the face of loss. As long as we endeavor to preserve what truly makes us whole, the stories that we create about ourselves and the stories we tell about those we love. You can probably guess I enjoyed this story a lot. I love characters so much, and I felt there were a lot of rich characters in this story. I would have liked to spend more time with some of them, but that just wasn't the way this story flowed. The story had a lot going on vibes, and yet every chapter did have a narrative structure. It wasn't all just mood and feeling. So there were little stories contained within, and then they all stitched together to tell an overarching story. And that overarching story may not have had a very propulsive narrative, yet it still had a through line. So it wasn't disjointed. It wasn't a bunch of vignettes that had no relationship to one another. They all were circling around these same ideas of humanity and of relationship and of meaning and of how to explore what it means to be whole. As a debut novel, it is incredibly promising. I look forward to reading anything else that Anton Hur writes. Let me know what you think. Have you read this novel? What did you think about it? Are you looking forward to it? Like I said, it spans a whole bunch of different genres. It's a gentle story, but it has sci-fi thriller elements, and it has dystopian future elements and utopian future elements, but it all has heart at its center. With that, I'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you. Be kind to yourselves, take care of one another, and go slowly.